Ken Loach, Britain's foremost politically engaged filmmaker. His work explores issues of social justice, freedom and power, and has twice won him the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. In 2006 for The Wind That Shakes the Barley, and 10 years later for I, Daniel Blake, a contemporary British story about unemployment and poverty.
Go back to your desk and let us sign on and do the job that the taxpayer pays you for. This is a bloody disgrace.
In this episode of This Cultural Life, the Radio 4 podcast, he reveals his formative influences and experiences, and how at the age of 86, he's still as fired up as ever.
There's an anger, actually.
Is there?
I think that's what drives you on. Well, you can't see it happen. You can't see it happen and be indifferent, you know. You can't. If there's something that puts fuel in the tank, it's seeing hope destroyed, you know. Very good. I think in my acting days I did a tiny bit of BBC radio. So
Oh, you did?
it might have been in this very studio,
Okay, right.
some 60-odd years ago.
Really? Yeah. Fantastic. Wow, we've got to dig those performances from
I
the
can't think
vaults
what
then.
it was something.
Ken Loach, welcome to This Cultural Life.
It's a great pleasure to come and good to see you.
You
Again.
too. You were born in 1936. You grew up in the Midlands. Tell me about your family. What did your parents do?
My father was electrical engineer. He took his apprenticeship in the mines. The whole family, my father's family were miners from the Warwickshire coalfields. And he worked at Alfred Herbert's machine tool factory all his life, 40-odd years.
Skilled worker then?
Yes, a skilled worker, electrician. And he had a work ethic that was formidable. He worked 7 days a week. And my mother had been a hairdresser, but like women of that time, it was a matter of pride for my father that she should not have to work. But lovely woman, very kind.
What sort of cultural upbringing did you have at home?
Well, it was a very normal, I guess, suburban house, semi-detached in Nuneaton.
Cinemas nearby?
There were cinemas, but we didn't go as a family. I was never very interested in the cinema. I was more interested in theatre.
Was it just the films didn't appeal, the sort of thing that was being shown?
It just didn't attract me. I cared passionately about the theatre from having been in the school play The Tempest at age 11 as a nymph or something. And I don't know, I just got the bug. And there was a rep company that came to Nuneaton 3 days a week. This is the late 40s, early 50s. And it became what I was obsessed by.
On This Cultural Life, I asked my guests to nominate the people, places, the experiences, the works, cultural works that have had a direct influence on their own creativity. And your first choice is perhaps surprising. You've nominated a week that you spent in Blackpool in the 1940s, seeing variety shows on the pier. Who did you see?
Yes. Once a year, we went for a week in Blackpool. And Blackpool was at its height. This is the late 40s. We might have even gone during the war, I don't remember. It was the great comics of the time. Jewel Morris, Ethel Reverell, Gracie West, Nat Jackley, Albert Modley, and Donald Pears, the singer. It was a great experience. It was the highlight of the year. But the great comic was Frank Randall. Frank Randall was scurrilous. He was a little fella, wiry little fella, and he had 2 or 3 characters. They were sketches, rather. It wasn't stand-up, it was sketches. And he'd be a vulgar old man. He'd take his teeth out. And it was...
It was bawdy humour.
It was risque for the time, but by today's standards, it wouldn't be seen as... It would seem as very tame. But he was a great comic.
Your name?
Clutterbuck, Jeremiah Clutterbuck.
Jeremiah Clutterbuck.
Aye.
Now listen, Jerry.
Jerry, Mr. Jerry, if you don't mind, I've a handle to my name.
So sorry, Mr. Buttercluck, Clutterbuck, Shuttlecock.
I'll stand no old book from thee.
So I was only saying, Mr. Cluckinghen.
Yes, my name's Cattletruck, Tutterpluck. I'll have no more of this.
Calm yourself.
Oh.
He would generate laughter that was extraordinary. My father would be weeping with laughter, and my mother too. For a kid, it was just overwhelming, and just the joy of it. And I think that does stay with you. And I've worked with comics a lot, and I think it stems from that just enjoyment of seeing a full house rock with laughter.
Seeing what it's like to get a reaction on a stage, were you tempted by performance to work on the stage yourself?
I was desperate. I mean, the other big influence was going to Stratford-on-Avon. We lived 30 miles from Stratford. I used to cycle to Stratford with friends or on my own. Cycle to Stratford in an evening and cycle back at midnight, having seen the great plays and the great actors of the time, Olivier or Gielgud or Michael Redgrave or all the stalwarts of the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, as it was then.
You studied law at Oxford, didn't you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you pursue that career? Or were you never particularly tempted?
My father was desperate that I should do well academically. And I was lucky I passed the exam to get into Oxford, extraordinary, and did law. I'd read the great lives of the great barristers of the Edwardian and first part of the 20th century, Marshall Hall and Norman Burkitt, and reading their trials is very glamorous. And my father was very keen on that, and partly because I knew it would please him, and partly because I was interested. But the theatre got too big a hold. We were doing play after play in the University Dramatic Society or the musicals, and I joined an Inn of Court to be a barrister, and I thought, this isn't for me. When you read the cases in court, they sound fantastic. But, of course, that's the tip of a very big iceberg. And I knew I'd got stamina, but not that kind of stamina. And he was very disappointed.
How far do you think can we see the legacy of those legal studies at Oxford in your films, particularly in that pursuit of social justice?
I think it comes from somewhere else. When I was at university, I wasn't particularly political. But the thing I did see at Oxford was wealth. I mean, I'd done national service 2 years in the RAF before I went to university. And that was an education because, we were sort of, just a normal household, modest but not poor. And going into being in a billet with 21 other lads, there were people who were really poor there. And I went from that to Oxford, and my God, people were rich there. And there were people there who knew they would rule the world, who had a sense of entitlement that was extraordinary. And seeing this wealth on parade and the casual ease with which people lived a wholly different life. I mean, that's what stayed with me at Oxford.
Your next choice for this programme is joining the team that produced the BBC's Wednesday plays in the mid-1960s. You directed 10 of these plays, including arguably the two best-known ones, Up the Junction and Cathy Come Home. Before we talk about the individual works, what were you and the team trying to achieve with the Wednesday plays? What was the ethos?
Well, it was an extraordinary moment of luck. The BBC hired a producer called Sidney Newman, and his brief was contemporary drama, straight after the 9 o'clock news on a Wednesday, and you had an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. Unheard of now. And the ethos was to challenge the news. The news went before us, and we said, we're going to be the real news. We're going to say what's really happening.
Was there also, stylistically, because so many of the dramas that were produced by the Wednesday play had that verite, documentary-like feel, was the idea to almost make them an extension of the news in the mind of the viewers?
Well, that developed. I mean, to begin with, they were theatrical dramas, you know, in the old studios with like theatre sets, big electronic cameras pointing in. So they were called plays. And we found that we needed to be on the streets. You know, we wanted to be out there really filming life and putting stories in amongst it. And there was no way the BBC would allow us to do it. So when there was a gap in the schedules, I got hold of Nell Dunn's book of Up the Junction, which is like little vignettes of working class life in Battersea. Kids up to mischief. The energy and mischief of youth. And I said, we can do this. The book is very cinematic as it is, very quickly puts 6 or 7 stories together, linked the characters. We had a script in a few days. We got a 16mm camera, shot in 4 days. We shot half the film. Came back into the studio, and instead of vision mixing, we knew there was a 16mm backup recording of what had gone on in the studio in case of emergencies. And against much complaining, we used the 16mm backup copy and cut it into the 16mm we'd shot on the streets, and we'd made a film.
What you focus on is the lives of 3 young women in South London and their relationships with men, but one woman in particular who ends up having an illegal backstreet abortion.
She was nothing but a cheap thrill.
Hello, Winnie. It's Rube. Can you come over?
Did you know when you were making it that this drama would become, or was potentially, very controversial stuff?
Well, you never know, but I think we knew we were up to something. We knew we were up to something, and we knew we were breaking the rules, and we were lucky enough to get away with it. And Sidney Newman, who was head of drama, he gave us his support. And we weren't micromanaged, you see, like now. I mean, nobody knew about it until it was done.
Until it was broadcast?
No, until it was finished.
Yeah.
So it just happened. But fortunately, Mary Whitehouse was just beginning her tirade to clean up the BBC. And she took against it and created a hell of a fuss.
As a teacher responsible for sex education, I had it laid upon me to give children sex education based on chastity before marriage and fidelity within it. And the truth was that my work was being totally undercut by the way premarital sex was being made normal on television night after night.
10 million people watched Up the Junction. Extraordinary figures. Did Mary Whitehouse's reaction help you, do you think?
It helped us in the extent that they knew about us. There were stories in the press. And there was a thing called Late Night Lineup, which was a great show on BBC Two, where if you'd been in, you created a fuss, you were on Late Night Lineup to defend yourself.
What we were trying to do there was to capture an actuality. Now, we know in actual life that the important things are not the positions we stand in and the way we express ourselves. We tried to capture an actuality flavour, the sort of excitement
But it isn't
you get.
actuality.
No, but we tried to get as near as we could to it. This is the point.
They were extraordinary times, really, now, looking back.
But when you are dealing with such important issues, and as you say, you're coming straight off the back of the news, and you're a young director, did it feel like a huge responsibility, given the amount of people that were watching your work?
It felt like an opportunity. I mean, at the time there was a whole campaign beginning about legalising termination because of the backstreet abortions were appalling. They were the only recourse many women had. So that was in the air, and that wasn't done lightly. I mean, when I talk about it, it's with enthusiasm, but it wasn't done lightly. And there are voices from doctors and medics within the film talking about it and why it was so serious and why the law had to change.
Take the lowest figure, 52,000 abortions a year. That's 1,000 abortions a week. Something like 5 or 6 every hour of every day. And that's taking the minimum figure.
Cathy Come Home, which you directed in the following year, 1966, is about the effects of unemployment and poverty and homelessness in particular on a young couple. 12 million people watched that drama. Devastating stuff. What are your abiding memories of shooting Cathy Come Home?
We shot it in 3 weeks, mainly handheld camera, 16mm. We went to different parts of the country. I mean, I was learning the trades. I mean, it was very rough and ready. But again, I think we knew we were onto something. Homelessness was a big issue then. And then it was a question of making it not softening it up. The act of wrenching a child from its mother is as horrendous as an act by the state as you can think. It's extraordinarily brutal thing to do. And for social circumstances to dictate, or that because of the social context, it is acceptable to take children from their mother. It is shocking. So we thought, well, you know, that's the end of the film. Something that only took a couple of hours on Liverpool Street Station, and we set it up with a hidden camera so that anybody passing by would see what was happening and respond.
Cathy Come Home was so powerful. It had such an effect that it led to not only the inevitable complaints, but questions in Parliament. And the homelessness charity Shelter was established, I think, the following year. Did those tangible effects of the drama set you on a course for the sort of films and the sort of work that you do in the decades afterwards?
I was already on that course, really. Yes, the effect was, I mean, far greater than we could have expected. You don't expect questions in Parliament. You don't expect that. I think now there are things we would criticise about Cathy, but the devastation of what poverty and hardship can do to people's lives has, I guess, always been a central theme with the writers I've worked with and the team I've worked with.
Your next choice for this programme is Czech cinema of the 1960s. Which filmmakers, which movies in particular are you thinking?
Yes, the Czech cinema was a huge delight because of their humanity and their warmth and their respect for people. What was interesting for me was to say, I love these films. Let me look at where have they put the camera for that shot? What lens have they used? How did they get that moment in the performance? To imagine how, if I wanted to do that, what would I do to create it?
Give us an example of a scene that sticks in your mind from one of those films from the time that really struck a chord with you or made you think, I want to try something like that.
The scene in The Blonde in Love, which is a story of factory girls in a Czech village. Shortly after the war, during the war, the men have gone to the army. They're desperate for boyfriends. They get the word that a number of the military are going to be billeted in the village. They're expecting bright young fellas in uniforms. And of course the soldiers are approaching middle age and they've already got wives at home and they're not what the girls had in mind at all.
A dělalo se kolem toho řečí. No, místo kluků záložáci a jaký pěkný. Sami dědové.
There's a great scene where the dance is arranged. The girls come in and they sit on one side of the dance hall and the men come in and sit on the other side. And, of course, they're great disappointment. And that scene, the observation between the two sides.
Ale dívej na ty holky tamhle, člověče.
Prosím tě, co je to zač? To je strašný. Proč se sem díváš? No, pořád. Holky, co když pro nás přijdou tancovat? Prosím tě.
Proč by to nebylo možný, prosím tě? To pak jsi nějaký šereda?
One bloke takes one side of his wedding ring off and it rolls across the floor and gets under the table of one of the groups of girls. And of course he's got to try and get it back. And it's a very funny scene, but it looks as though he set up the dance and observed it, as well as setting up specific things to happen, which of course you've got to shoot directly.
You made your first feature film in 1967. That was Poor Cow, which starred Carol White, who you'd worked with in Cathy Come Home.
Yes.
And then in 1969, Kes, one of the greatest British films of all time. I mean, how much was the visual style of Kes influenced by some of that Czech cinema?
Kes for us was a milestone. And the key figure there was the cameraman, Chris Menges. I made good friends with Chris. And Chris said a very important thing. He said, what happens in front of the camera is more important than what happens behind the camera, within the camera. That you've got to concentrate. Don't try and be clever with the camera. Create something of worth that you're going to film and respect it. And I feel that's what Czech cinema did. And that was our model for Kes. And I never went back to the handheld chase the action. It was always, now let's observe it.
There is a great sense of naturalism in that film. There's a scene which I remember particularly with Colin Welland, who plays the teacher, who's encouraging Billy Casper, asks him to talk to the class, to explain his passion for the kestrel.
Good morning. Entry of the gladiators. Have you been?
Yes, Mr. Grass, sir.
In for the stick?
Sir.
How many did you get?
2.
Did it hurt?
Not bad.
Oh, hope it didn't. I'll sit down.
The kids in the classroom didn't know what was going to happen. David knew, and
David Bradley,
who played Billy Casper, he knew what was going to be said, and he'd trained the kestrel himself with Barry Hines and Richard Barry's brother.
Now, come on. Tell us about this hawk. Where'd you get it from?
I found it, sir.
Where?
In the woods.
Where'd you keep it?
In a shed.
What do you feed it on?
Beef, mice, birds.
Well, isn't it cruel to keep it in a shed? I mean, wouldn't it be happier flying free?
Don't keep it in shed all the time, sir. Fly it every day.
He was good at learning lines, but I said, look, just know the story, know what you've got to say. And then it's a sort of partly remembered, partly improvised scene. And the boys hadn't heard it before. The questions, I mean, they were some were there and some I fed them on the day. So that it was, as far as one could make it, it was a life happening. And I would go up to a kid and say, ask him this. So Billy didn't know what the questions would be.
When do you feed it? How many times a day? To start off with, 3 or 4 times, to get it plump.
You make it all sound very exciting, Billy.
It is, sir, but the most exciting thing when I flew free first time, sir.
Do you want to hear about that? All right, come on.
So he was improvising, but also basing it on his own experience.
Yeah.
When I got in about 70 yards from her, in middle of the field, I called her. Kes, come on, Kes. Come on, then. No, it happened. So I thought, well, I better walk back and pick her up. So while I was walking back, I saw her flying. She came like a bomb. About a yard off floor, like lightning, head still, and you couldn't hear wings. They wanted sound front wings, and straight onto the glove, wham! And she'll grab me for meat.
Looking at it now, if you sat down and watched it, I mean, would you be very proud of that film?
I'd be very pleased I did it, yes. I mean, but pride is something is not a good emotion, but I'm very pleased to be part of it.
The next choice that you've made for this cultural life, you've chosen real people whose stories have fed into your films, and you said in an email that you sent us, people who have clarified and strengthened a view of the world. People like who?
Well, yes, that's I mean, we've been very lucky, and in the films we've done, which I've tried to tell stories of everyday working class life and also some pivotal moments in history. We did our Daniel Blake about the cruelty of the benefit system. We filmed in a food bank in Newcastle.
Is this the queue for the food bank?
It is, fine.
Do you know how long we'll be waiting?
Oh, a canny long time, I reckon. Been there ages already.
Yes, cheers.
And when we're doing the scene, there's a girl in the film who goes and she's so hungry. And the woman who took her round worked in food banks. And she said, as she said, who's taking her round, she said, before she began, she said, "Can I help you with your shopping?"
Jackie? Yeah? Would you be able to help Katie with her shopping today, please? Thank you.
Hi, Katie. Thank you. So we've got one adult and two children. Yeah, come with me.
What sensitivity to do that to someone who's begging for food. To say, "Can I help you with your shopping?" You know, and when you see the courage and the sensitivity of people like that, how can you not tell their stories? We've got used to food banks. It's not news anymore. But people are desperate. I mean, we saw people who were ashamed of their hunger. And hunger has a function. Hunger has a function. It is a discipline. If you don't do the work you're told, you're hungry.
You're still visibly moved at recalling those individual testimonies of people. So you feel there is a responsibility, there's almost an obligation.
There's an anger, actually.
Is there?
I think that's what drives you on. Well, you can't see it happen. You can't see it happen and be indifferent, you know. You can't. And I think that's what, if there's something that, you know, that puts fuel in the tank, that's it, you know. It's anger. It's anger again seeing hope destroyed, you know.
Those are some of the issues that you are addressing in your films. What effect do you want your films to have? Do you want for people to come out of your films feeling as angry as you go into making them?
I think you want to leave people, say, with a question, you know. Why do we allow this to happen? Why do we allow this to happen? In the knowledge of the hardship it causes. What is the possible answer? You have to do what concerns you, you know. I mean, you have to feel, I think you have to feel, I've got no alternative, I've just got to do, we've got to tell this story. And it takes 2 years to make a film. You know, very hard to do something that you don't believe in.
As you say, each film takes about 2 years to make. You're now 86 years old. You've come here to our studio straight from an edit suite, another film, another social drama. Are you still as driven as you ever were?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I think you know, you can't stop the frailties of age, really, and so you know, sooner or later time will run out. But it's being able to work with people, good people, talented people, to make a film is a huge privilege. To meet the people, to be able to tell their stories, to fashion it in the sharpest, best way we can. What a privilege, you know.
Ken Loach, thank you so much for sharing your cultural life.
Thanks very much.